lot of reasons why we choose to engage in self-destructive behavior. And a lot of the time, it's not our fault. It's usually because of some kind of trauma that occurred somewhere in our development. But it is our responsibility not to allow these self-destructive behaviors continue to destroy our life. And what we must do to begin addressing these bad habits is to understand what purpose they serve in the first place. Because nobody just goes and starts doing heroin for no reason. Usually there is some kind of deep-seated problem that has been unaddressed. And it doesn't even have to be heavy drugs. It could be social media. It might be alcohol. It might be nicotine. But from my perspective, all bad habits and vices are rooted in the same exact problem. We may have individual trauma that we've experienced in our lives, and that causes us to engage in these bad behaviors, but it is the same root problem that we all suffer from. And one of the best examples I like to use is from the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and where the main character, Dennis, he starts talking about what he calls the God hole. And it's this hole inside all of us, like this big gaping ravine. And a lot of people choose to fill this hole with God. But he said he didn't believe in God, so he just wanted power and women. But the wisdom in what he was talking about was that it is true that we all have this black hole inside of us. And it gives us this sense of emptiness, this sense of lack, like we're incomplete, like we need to be filled by something. And so we turn to these different things that give us short-term temporary pleasure. And they bring us up for a moment, but then they bring us equally back down, because we are forced to experience the lack of that good feeling. And so no matter what behavior we engage in, there will always be a come down, because the good feeling doesn't last forever. It's temporary, it's changing. And what you will find is that all experience in the external world is changing, and it is temporary. And so if all things that we can experience never brings lasting satisfaction, then what are we to do? And I say the closest thing you will find to lasting satisfaction is purpose in your life. It is the reason why you are here on this earth, and you will know when you are aligned with your purpose, when you have a sense of inner peace and joy, and this peace and this joy, it won't really go away that easily, so long as you are aligned with your purpose. And you can also tell when you're not aligned with your purpose. You'll feel the anxiety, you'll feel the depression, you'll feel the negative emotions. Because somewhere inside of us, there is a compass, and it tells us when we are not going in the right direction. But what happens is that we don't listen because we are so distracted by the world around us, by all the shiny objects. And this problem has only gotten worse because of social media. Our attention spans are at the lowest they've ever been. And unless we create the space to quiet our minds, to look within, then that voice within us, that compass, it will always be drowned out by the noise of the world. And so long as that voice is unheard, we will be led astray. And we will find ourselves in places, in states of being that are so negative that we could have never imagined how we got here. And if you don't wake up, if you don't pay attention, it's easy to drift and wander to these hellish places. Because oftentimes the suffering is never strong enough to wake us up. And that's why I say maintaining your addiction is the absolute worst thing you can ever do. If you drink alcohol, learning to maintain yourself, you learn to live a semi-functional life. But you have this black hole that's just draining all of your energy. And you don't even know it because you can't see clearly, because your vision has been clouded by this substance. And because the suffering is never strong enough to wake you up. And for instance, in my life, I probably drank so much between the ages of 14 and 17, all through high school. I had so many experiences of just puking my guts out that now that I'm older, there's no desire to drink, because the suffering was so heavy, because the suffering was so intense, that there was never a desire to go back to it. And the way I handle my addictions and self-destructive behavior, and I wouldn't recommend this to you because this is something that is not safe and it's unhealthy. But what I do is that if I see myself falling into the downward spiral, I don't resist. Instead, I say, okay, this is what you want to do. You know it's bad for you. You know it's not the right thing to do. But I'm not going to feel any guilt, any shame, any resistance toward this. In fact, I'm going to go into it 10 times more, because I don't want to be able to sustain that behavior. I want the suffering to be so bad that I'll think twice next time before doing it again. And I can't recommend this to you because there are some addictions that it's just not feasible. But what I would recommend is don't allow any addiction or self-destructive behavior to be the norm. And when your behavior is causing so much suffering within you, it's unsustainable. So it can never become the norm. And you see, for those who are thinking about maybe listening to what I'm saying, you must have within you a kind of grace. You have to, in a way, give yourself to a higher power to help you through that situation. Because if you do not receive that guidance, well then, it's possible that the evil forces might just take advantage of your poor decisions. And we do not want that. And I might even suggest that instead of giving yourself away to a higher power, recognize that you are the higher power. But so long as you believe yourself to be this identity that has been constructed over your lifetime, there will always be a sense of separation from divinity and you. And so if you're in that state, then by all means, pray to God, pray to a higher power, ask for guidance, ask for help. But when you realize that you are the creator, the separation from you and divinity disappears. And so you have the power to overcome any addiction and any self-destructive behavior. The power is within you already. But sometimes we get ourselves in such terrible situations that we don't have time to figure it out. Or maybe we're so lost in the mind that the chances of us finding the truth is not very high. And this brings us back to the root of all addictions and all vices. And that is this inner sense of incompleteness, of lack, this black hole within all of us. It's like when we consume something or we engage in a bad behavior, we need more of it next time to get the same level of enjoyment out of it. And in the same way, when you feed a black hole, it just gets bigger. And so the key to healing our addictions is in the recognition that there is a black hole, and then finding something large enough to fill it. But what do people do? They try and fill it with alcohol. They try and fill it with sex. They try and fill it with food, overconsumption. There are a million different ways that people engage in trying to fill this emptiness within. But there is only one thing that can fill this dark hole within us, and that is God. And for those who do not resonate with the idea of God, will then understand that what can fill this black hole within us is the divine light of consciousness. And that divine light of consciousness is our true being. We are that light, all experience from the moment we are born until the moment we are dead. Whether in the waking state or in the dream state, all occurs within the awareness of consciousness. And so consciousness is the eternal state within us. Everything else is temporary and it's changing. And so anything that is temporary and changing will never provide any lasting satisfaction. And that is why so many people suffer with bad habits, addictions, vices. It's because they are trying to find lasting satisfaction from temporary things. And so purpose will be able to get you out of these addictions. And so your purpose in life needs to be more powerful than the addictions. And that is why a lot of people fall to addictions, is because they are not clear on what their purpose is. They never ask themselves. They drift, they wander through life. It's almost like people, they say, oh, I'm just gonna wing life. I'm just gonna wing it. I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? I mean, arguably the most important thing is the fact that we're alive. I mean, what's more important than that? And you're not going to take the time to get clear on what you want in life? I mean, that's what's really one thing that always baffles me, is that people just don't ask themselves the question. It's what do I want out of life? And I think a lot of the times it comes from a lack of belief in oneself, where they say, oh, I'm not good enough to have this, or I'm not worthy of that. And so they don't even try. And then what happens? Well, guess what? When the winter comes, and it comes for all of us, you will have nothing to get you through those experiences. Through the tough times. You'll have built your house on sand or out of straw, however you want to look at it. You will have no foundation. When the storm comes, you will be uprooted because you never went deep enough into your purpose. And so the deeper and more clear we can get on what our purpose is and what we want out of life, well, then it's much easier to say no to these substances and these self-destructive behaviors, because we have our eyes on something that is more important. But if we don't have our focus on a dream, on a goal, well, then it's easy to fall back to these temporary pleasures, because at least we're getting something out of it, right? at least we're feeling something, even if it's killing us. And you know, another thing is that we don't realize that addiction is oftentimes just suicide, but in a slow, drawn-out way. And I think deep down we know that. And it is because we don't love ourselves enough. We don't feel that we are worthy, that we don't take our well-being and health into consideration. And so maybe you weren't gifted a certain level of self-esteem like many others. But it doesn't really matter what you've been through, because you can create any reality that you want now. You can heal anything that you've experienced. That's not the problem, that's not the issue. The issue is the limiting beliefs, and it is the story that we tell ourselves that, oh no, I can't do it. That's not for me. You have to realize that this is just, it's just something that's made up that we choose to believe in. It's the identity that we've created for ourselves and that we've been conditioned. And so if you want to know that which provides lasting satisfaction, so we don't need to rely on these silly temporary pleasures that bring no lasting satisfaction, we must look within ourselves. And it is through this present moment that is the gateway to paradise. And you see, it is the mind that draws us into these self-destructive behaviors. It is our rumination about the past and our fears and worries about the future. And these things create stress, and we use these bad behaviors as a way to cope with our stress. And so until we have the proper tools to manage ourselves, to take control of our emotions, to have control over our minds, then it will be easy to fall into these vices. And so we can start to minimize stress in our bodies by not thinking about the past and not thinking about the future and remaining present. Because what you will find is that there are no problems here and now. There are only problems in the mind. But so long as we are identified with our minds, what are you going to do? We are attached to the stories. They help feed our negative self-identity. But do they help us? No. Because if you were clear on what you really wanted, and you observed your thoughts and the way you speak to yourself, you would understand exactly why your life is the way it is. And so it's time to get clear on your purpose. It's time to get clear on what you want out of life. And we must manage our emotions and manage our mind so we don't have to resort to false temptation.